Good evening, good morning. Welcome to lesson 11 for PADM 401. I just want to actually start off with I got some midterm feedback, and one of the things that came out was we like your lessons, but it's Monday and it's a little bit too late. Can you push them back so we can prep for them for the upcoming week? So I apologize for that. I will make sure I put these YouTube videos out Sunday night, so you can log into them on Monday morning before you actually start the lesson. One thing I will say, though, is I want you to do the lesson sequentially. I know some people I give exceptions to because they're traveling or they might be overseas, but I lock the lessons up for most people because I want you to go week to week to week so you can interact with your classmates during that particular week. So there's another comment that came out, and I just want to address that. So announcements, paper two due July 24th. Please provide paper topics to me, just like last time. So propose paper topic, and I'll give you an answer whether it's good or not, and any required feedback. I ask again, we're 2 weeks out. I could tell if you did your paper last minute for paper one, so my answer is start thinking about a topic now. Start writing your paper early. Start outlining it so you can actually write it from the get-go. So again, you should already have a good idea for your paper and should be on your way. So current events, the Dallas police shooting. I don't know what to say about whether Dallas or any of the incidents we've had in the past couple of weeks with police interactions. I know we have law enforcement personnel here, and I don't want to go into too much detail on use of force and things of that nature. Suffice to say, it is a tragedy, but I also say one thing I don't like is when I hear the media talk about America falling apart or tearing at the fabric of the United States. We're not at a civil war, at least that's what the media is trying to say. And I think the media, again, likes to hype issues, especially issues relating to violence, terrorism, Ebola from 2 years ago. So the one thing I would say is that one thing that's come out that I'm actually would have to feign ignorance on is this use of apparently a robotic explosive to take out the sniper. And there's legal questions that have come up, and I don't see the legality or the issues with legality. If they use an explosive big enough to take down a city block or a building or a floor of a building, that might be one thing. But to use something like this just seems like an appropriate use of force. And I'll leave it at that. If anyone has comments on that and has worked with these issues with a little bit more fidelity, please let me know. But I again, having just heard this or heard what I heard in the media, I really don't see a Homeland Security or a ELAG or issues with the proportional use of force with doing that. So that covers, again, current events. Lesson 9 and 10, warning. I think there's several issues. A lot of you brought up the risk assessment, but I want one thing that came across, I think, consistently in the discussions I've read is that the two functions, warning and public information, particularly it's lesson 9, and what levels of government are they responsible for? And then this feeds into lesson 11, because if you have something like terrorism, the warning is going to come from an intelligence agency, or usually a federal level entity. Yes, we have state intelligence, state local officials, but when it's coming to an issue of terrorism, the warning is usually validated from the federal government. Even if it's domestic terrorism, usually the FBI or another federal agency will validate that, yes, this crosses the threshold of terrorism, and is this a threat or not? And then the public information issue. Again, some people brought this up, and I would say, again, public information should be held at the federal level, particularly as it relates to issues of terrorism. State Governor Billy Bob, for lack of a better term, and I don't mean to be offensive, but was someone at a state level going to be able to understand what, if this is an actual threat, if ISIS says I want to do something bad, or there's a website out there that someone's logging in, how to evaluate that threat and determine whether that threat is actually connected to someone overseas or if it's just a local issue. Really, I think that a federal agency has to make that assessment. One thing that came up, again, I mentioned this last week at SOC North, if there was a loose nuclear weapon, who makes that call? And again, I didn't say it last week, but I think a federal official is going to have the requisite expertise to say that this loose nuclear material can have this type of impact and is this much more worrisome and can be a threat to these people. That, I think, is a core federal function. It should not be done by a state or local official. Again, local official Billy Bob Joe, again, don't mean to be derisive here, but he's not going to know all the issues with shelf life for plutonium or shelf life of a radiological device that maybe an expert at the Department of Energy will, or another federal agency. So, a lot of people had that debate, but I think warning and public information, again, should come from the top. And I'll kind of end that discussion there. Lesson 11 preview, we're going to look at, all hazards, risk, but focus it on terrorism. And just, the lesson outlines this better, but there's a different way to look at risk and all hazards when you're looking from a known disaster or a known potential disaster, like a hurricane, tornado, earthquake for those on the West Coast. That is fundamentally different than an unknown entity like terrorism, where you don't know how to respond in different, you don't know where the threat is and you don't know what type of threat will be. So the question that comes up is, when you're looking at or risk assessment or vulnerabilities or consequence, what will the future terrorism be? Right now, the consequence of terrorism tends to be something like September 11th. That's a high consequence event. You had 3,000 people dying. However, let's up the ante and we talk about bioterrorism or chemical terrorism. Let's up the ante even more and let's go to genetically engineered bioterrorism that is resistant to vaccines. There's a lot of talk now about how biology or biotechnology is now becoming diffused. What it took 20 years ago, you needed a university or government lab to produce. Tomorrow, someone will be able to produce in a garage. Cyber terrorism, and I'll be the first to say I don't think cyber terrorism is going to be a future issue, just because of the difficulties in being able to conduct a cyber attack for a terrorist group. Cyber terrorism tends to focus on state level actors and then criminal actors who hack into various information databases to steal your identity. But those are the questions to think about, again, as you're going through this. What will the future terrorism be, and what types of risk analysis and risk assessment is necessary to accommodate for what's going to happen in the future? One thing I will say, again, I always want to keep this lesson in mind. Will we move away from bombs and guns? Despite all our advances in technology, the weapons that terrorists have used have not changed too much in the last 100 years. It's kidnappings, assassinations with guns, bombs. Those tactics haven't been altered. And there's a reason why a terrorist will use a bomb against a soft target, because it will give them the publicity that they're looking for, that doesn't require a whole degree of sophistication, like a bio attack or even something a little bit more nefarious. So the question comes up, will terrorists move away from bombs or guns? and what level of risk do we need to accommodate any increase in this type of tactic. So think about that as you go through this lesson. And again, I will look forward to your discussion points. And one thing I just want to circle back to discussion posts I've marked for lesson 8. 9 and 10 I should have by the end of the week or the weekend or so. If there's an issue with that, please let me know. So have a good week, and I will look forward to your discussion posts, and most importantly, I look forward to your paper topics.